This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's May 12th, 2025. On this day in 1933, the United States adopted a measure called the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which was meant to serve as a reset button for the nation's farmers. It was the Great Depression, so there were all the broad problems with the economy for farmers to deal with, of course. But things had actually gotten out of whack even before that. World War I created a boom in the market for American farm goods, leading farmers to invest in more land and increase their output. Then in the early 1920s, demand dropped and the prices for agricultural products dropped significantly. There had been a lot of efforts through the 20s to try and restore balance, but the math never really worked out. Farmers didn't want to cut back on production, and they didn't want to sell for lower prices either. But the market just would not pay them what they wanted or buy all of what they grew. Then add in the Depression and a sharp contraction in how much money their customers had to spend on food, and it went from a shaky house of cards to one that was in the midst of collapse. The goal of the Adjustment Act was to return the agricultural market and farmers' purchasing power to pre-World War I levels, and that meant paying farmers to farm less. Well, paying the landowners anyway. In all too many cases, on sharecrop farms, the relatively well-off landowners pocketed the cash and just evicted some of the sharecroppers who actually lived and worked in the fields. But the money the government paid out came from a tax on food processors. 3 years after the act was signed into law, the Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional because of that tax. But the concept of achieving larger goals for agricultural markets by giving farmers an incentive to cut back on production is one that's never really gone away. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The anniversary of that agricultural law got me thinking about Tennessee's agricultural industry, and a piece of it that I may have never really talked about on this podcast: livestock. Cattle farming is a big industry in this state, and it's the kind of farming I'm most familiar with. After my grandfather retired from the Air Force, he kept a herd of beef cattle on the outskirts of Clarksville, and from time to time we'd give him some help with the annual vaccinations or caring for a calf whose mother had died. And actually, we ended up living on a lot out in Rutherford County that was bordered on two sides by cow pasture. We didn't have a direct hand in any of those animals' care, of course. But that farmer cheaped out on a fence that wasn't really up to the task. So once in a blue moon, we'd have to get a little involved when we found a bovine visitor in our yard, snacking on my mom's plants. Thankfully, we learned a little up at Grandpa's about getting cows to move where you want, so we could generally herd them back into the pasture before we called the neighbor to fix his fence again. I don't think people really tend to think of Tennessee as a big cattle state, certainly not like Texas or anything. But beef is consistently one of Tennessee's top agricultural commodities. Data from the Ag Department shows beef accounts for nearly 17% of Tennessee's farming products. And when I say farming products, I'm mixing in crops with livestock. We are really focused on beef cattle, though. Last year's agricultural count showed 826,000 head of animals raised for their beef in Tennessee, compared to 24,000 dairy cattle. And it's very tightly interconnected with another of those top commodities: hay. If you aren't around farms much, it's easy to forget that hay is a cash crop of its own. You may never buy that hay, but cattle farms sure do. And economists at the University of Tennessee have found that more than 19,000 people in this state have a hand in growing or selling hay in some capacity. Hay is grown in every one of our 96 counties. As you go down the list, other mammals are a much smaller business in this state. Our goat industry kind of looks like a smaller scale version of cattle. And I don't just mean smaller because the animals are. I mean, farmers are raising way more goats for meat than for milk, but there are far fewer of them than there are cattle. Sheep have an even smaller piece of the pie. Pig farms are so unusual here that they don't even get a mention in the state's annual overview. But there is some pork production in the state, and there are niches here for llamas and alpacas, even for birds like ostriches, believe it or not. But the number one livestock industry, at least by the number of animals in the state, is poultry. At the end of last year, there were 282 million chickens on Tennessee farms. According to officials, every major poultry breeder in the nation has facilities in our state. And we export all over the globe to Taiwan, Canada, Mexico, China, and a bunch of African nations. In 2022, which is the latest year I could find numbers for, our biggest international market for Tennessee poultry products was Angola. That accounted for $49 million of export business. Of course, none of the numbers I've cited and all of this have been from 2025 because that kind of data is only collected every so often, and it takes time to compile the reports with the final numbers, so I can't say for sure where things stand at this moment, but we can see some extraordinary pressures coming to play. Everything that's been going on with tariffs can't be great for our chicken exports. The bird flu has meant entire flocks of chickens had to be destroyed. And one significant market for Tennessee's food products has long been the school lunchrooms and food banks that buy fresh meat and produce using federal grants that DOJ cuts eliminated in March. In just a few minutes, an attempt to make it harder to convict people in Tennessee for someone else's crime. That's coming up after the newscast.
You know how important WPLN News has been to you and your family, and you have seen how high-quality local journalism is necessary to a thriving community. You can ensure that this service stays strong and stays available to all of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Join the Producers Circle with your gift of $100 or more each month and make the bold statement that you support the mission of a more informed and engaged community. Start your philanthropic journey with Nashville Public Radio today at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. After federal immigration agents arrested and detained drivers in South Nashville earlier this month, residents began calling upon city leaders to do more. And while the mayor has voiced opposition to the detentions, he's indicating there is little legally the city can do to intervene. Here's Metro's law director, Wally Dietz, who says Nashville is, quote, powerless.
We have absolutely no authority to instruct ICE not to carry out their enforcement actions. We have no authority to tell THP they cannot cooperate with ICE. This is one of the areas of the law where there's not shared authority. Federal, state, local governments often share authority. This is one of those areas where it is purely a federal enforcement matter.
ICE worked with the Tennessee Highway Patrol, or THP, to conduct the raids on May 3rd. Some residents had raised questions about THP's right to conduct traffic enforcement on neighborhood streets. Dietz clarified that a number of roads in South Nashville neighborhoods, like Nolensville Pike, Bell Road, and Old Hickory Boulevard, are within their jurisdiction. Some of Nashville SC's Latino supporters canceled their game day activities this weekend amid the raids. La Brigada de Oro, the club's largest Latin American fan group, announced on social media that it would not hold its pregame tailgate outside the stadium for Saturday's game. The message said the group was standing in solidarity with the injustices happening within the Latino community. According to the Tennessean, fans held up signs during and before the game, recognizing La Brigada de Oro. Another Nashville SC fan group, the Roadies, donated the money from its tailgate to the Belonging Fund, which provides financial emergency assistance to immigrants in Nashville. A group of public school students wrote a letter to city leaders expressing fear in the wake of the recent ICE raids in South Nashville. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on what protections these students want.
Over 80 students signed the letter asking that ICE agents be banned from entering schools and other places where kids gather. They worry that their loved ones could be detained next.
This could be my best friend. I could lose them tomorrow.
That's one of the students who signed the letter. She asked that her name be withheld out of fear of being targeted.
It could be my brother, my sister. It could be an aunt and uncle. It could be anyone now.
The high school junior says some of her friends are afraid to leave the house. Some have missed school and are afraid to go about daily tasks like picking up groceries or attending church.
We're just hoping that, the mayor and Dr. Battle will really be on our side with this and see our struggles and how unfair it is to us.
MNPS Superintendent Adrian Battle responded to the letter, offering support and saying that no ICE agents have entered schools. But the students are still worried. about themselves, their friends, and families.
If we don't act now, things are going to get so much worse, and they're already really bad.
Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
Some of Vanderbilt's international students feel unsupported by the university amid changing federal immigration policies. In recent months, the school sent students a series of emails about international travel, maintaining immigration status, and the use of social media. According to the Vanderbilt Hustler, one student said the emails were performative because Vanderbilt did not sign a national letter denouncing political interference in higher education. Another believes that Vanderbilt's trying to stop international students from speaking up for themselves. Some students say they would be better served through mentoring and stronger staff-student relations. Metro Nashville is hoping to recover $2 million in damages from the companies that used to run the city's juvenile detention facility. A new lawsuit accuses Youth Opportunity Investments and a similarly named sister company of shifting the contract from one firm to the other in order to avoid liability, then terminating that contract years early. The filing says Youth Opportunities told Metro officials that the shift was inconsequential because the two firms had the same administrators and employees and were different in name only. The Tennessean reports that turned out not to be the case. Metro is accusing the companies of breach of contract and fraud. The city's involvement with Youth Opportunities was already complicated because of how poorly the juvenile facility was run. 4 teenagers escaped the facility in 2019 after employees left the youth unattended. A redevelopment plan has taken a major step forward at the declining Rivergate Mall in Goodlettsville. The Nashville Mayor's office says it has an agreement with a Minnesota-based company to revitalize the 57-acre site. The plan calls for multifamily housing, including affordable units for seniors, and a wide mix of retail, restaurants, medical and other offices, hotels, and a WeGo transit facility. The mall dates to 1971. In the last 5 years, nearly 2/3 of the mall's storefronts have closed, and Metro says tax revenues have plummeted. Metro is proposing an incentive package that allows the developer, Miras LLC, to borrow $22 million for upfront infrastructure costs. The terms still await votes by the Industrial Development Board and Metro Council. Climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels intensified the deadly storms that struck Tennessee in early April. That's according to new analysis by the World Weather Attribution. Scientists with the group say the storms were 40% more likely to occur compared to a pre-industrial era climate. Also, global warming increased rainfall intensity by 9%. A series of storms in April included tornadoes, strong winds, and extreme rainfall. Officials say 10 people died in Tennessee. Some of the moisture fueling the heavy rain came from the Gulf of Mexico, where water temperatures were more than 2 degrees warmer than pre-industrial averages. That warming was made 14 times more likely due to climate change. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. In Tennessee, prosecutors can charge people for crimes committed by another person, even if they weren't directly responsible. Activist groups are working with state legislators to try to change that. From the Appalachia Mid-South newsroom, WUOT's Pierce Gentry has more.
He loved dogs. He used to be in a dog program in Hardeman County. But just different.
Shauna Hatcher sits at a table in a McDonald's near Trousdale Turner Correctional Center, looking over photos of her family. In some of them, her husband Sean holds their children. In others, their dogs. They were all taken during weekend visits to correctional facilities, where Sean has been incarcerated for 24 years. Shauna has dedicated her life to helping her husband earn his freedom.
And he really is a good guy, educated, well-spoken. He deserves a second chance, to live out here.
Sean Hatcher was sentenced 20 years ago to life in prison for first-degree murder, a crime he still insists he did not commit. He's currently serving out his sentence in Trousdale Turner Correctional Center outside of Nashville. He was charged under a prosecutorial law known as criminal responsibility for conduct of another.
Tennessee has a law that says you can be criminally responsible for the act of another if you knew about a crime that was about to be committed and you failed to report it to officials, a law which I wasn't aware of at the time.
Theda Murphy is the head of Abolition Works TN, a nonprofit criminal justice reform group in the state. She says prosecutors sometimes use the law to hand down harsh sentences based on flimsy evidence.
It's used to rope in a whole bunch of people that the prosecutors just feel should not be on the street.
These cases are often complex, like Sean's. In 2001, he was with his brother and 2 others during a shooting that killed 1 man. Sean admitted at the time to having a gun and being present during the murder, but says he did not shoot anybody. Prosecutors ultimately convicted him based on the criminal responsibility law.
I was running from God. I was young. I was a child.
Another nonprofit, Free Hearts, is currently advocating for more than 10 people in state prisons to be granted clemency, including Sean. Jada X is a statewide organizer for Free Hearts. She says many of the people they work with are in prison because of the criminal responsibility theory.
We try to bring and center the real voices of real people who are really experiencing these challenges with their loved ones.
The group also partnered with Tennessee lawmakers during this year's session to introduce a bill that would erase the criminal responsibility law. Stephen Crump is the executive director of the Tennessee District Attorneys General Conference. During a legislative panel in March, Crump spoke in opposition to the bill. He said criminal responsibility laws help prosecutors levy charges against accomplices to a crime.
If you go somewhere to rob somebody, and as a result of that somebody gets murdered, you are guilty of murder. You are attempting and assisting and helping that person commit the underlying crime, and if it results in someone's death, you shouldn't get a pass.
But Democratic State Senator Ramesh Akbari, a co-sponsor, says there are plenty of other state laws that can be used to charge accomplices.
We're not trying to stop someone from being punished. If they commit a crime, they should be punished, so aligning the punishment with the crime, that's our goal.
Akbari conceded it will be difficult to pass the bill as is and decided to defer it to next year. Lawmakers will spend the summer revising it to be more palatable to Tennessee's Republican Party and hope to reintroduce it during the 2026 session. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, I'm Pierce Gentry.
The Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom is a collaboration between NPR and several public radio stations in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky, including WPLN News. Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at local news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.